connection, okay? Imagine that you guys are shooting an arrow in a random direction, okay? What do you think are the chances that you're going to hit your target? Minimal, right? Now, communication works the same way. We all communicate on a daily basis, isn't it? You know, whether you're trying to get the other person to be more receptive to your perspective, or whether you're trying to sell a product, a service, or an idea. We are constantly communicating, right? But what we need to ask ourselves is, how effective are we in hitting our target? That is, in establishing a connection through our communication. Now, through these 6 keys to connection, you know, we'll see that a connection through communication is not just about powerful words being delivered perfectly. It encompasses so much more. It requires introspection. You know, it requires us to keep developing ourselves constantly so that whenever we voice our opinion, our target audience or our listener is not only more receptive to our perspective, but we are also able to inspire and influence change. Now, whether that be, you know, in our personal life, in our social life, or in our professional life. So the 6 keys to connection are, let me share my screen now. One second, guys. Okay, can you guys see this? Am I sharing it? Sorry, I'm very technologically challenged, so I need to make sure. Oh, you can see it. Okay, awesome. Okay, so the 6 keys to connection. So let's start with number 1. Start from the inside out. Okay, what do I mean by that? How many of you guys know of this dude? I'm sure some of you already know, and probably many of you guys know. So his name is Simon Sinek, right? So this guy is a world-renowned author. He is a marketing consultant and a motivational speaker. And he came up with, in one of his talks, he came up with a formula called the Golden Circle. And this Golden Circle explains why some individuals and leaders and organizations are able to inspire and influence change while others aren't. Okay, so this is what the Golden Circle looks like, okay? Now, Simon says that this is how most of us communicate in our lives. We tell people what we do, we tell people how we do it, and then how we are better off than the other person or the other company or our competitor. And then we expect our target audience or our client to buy into our idea or to invest in our product. Now, the reason we don't always get what we want is because we do not inspire. So Simon says that the most successful people in any field, they always think, act, and communicate from the inside out. They start with their why. So what is your why? Your why is your purpose. It is your cause. It is your core belief. It is the introspection that reveals why you do what you do. Now, let me share with you guys an example, okay? Why do you guys think people love Apple computers? They're beautifully designed, right? User-friendly, easy to use, right? Some of the reasons why people like. Now, imagine if their marketing message looks something like this. What do? We make great computers. How are they great? They're beautifully designed, user-friendly, and easy to use. Do you want to buy one? Do you think people would buy? Maybe some, maybe not, right? Because while all of the facts are true, I'm not sold. You know, I want to know, why are they great? Why are they user-friendly? Now, this is how Apple computers actually communicates. They start with their why. Everything that we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. How? The way we challenge the status quo is by making all of our products beautifully designed, user-friendly, and easy to use. What? We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? You see how different this marketing message feels? Now, because Apple starts with their why when defining their company, it makes Apple more than just a computer company selling features, right? They're able to attract customers who share their fundamental beliefs. So, your why is the core belief of the business. It is why the business exists. The how is how the business fulfills that core belief. And the what is what the company does to fulfill that core belief. Now, many companies do their marketing backwards. What they do is they start with their what, and then they move to their how. And oftentimes, they actually neglect to mention their why. But like Simon says, people don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. Now, another thing to remember, guys, is that the clearer your why and the easier you can put into words, the sooner you can get your team to buy into your vision. And sometimes we think that we are communicating our why, but we may actually be communicating our what and our how. So there's one thing that we need to remember, which is your why is always value-based. It is not task-based. Now, there is another reason as to why when you start from the inside out, when you start with your why, you're able to connect and inspire and influence change. And that reason is actually scientific. If you were to take the cross-section of a human brain can be divided into two parts that corresponds with these three sections. For example, the Homo sapien brain or the neocortex corresponds with the what section. Now, this section is responsible for all of our rational, our logical, and analytical thoughts. And it's also responsible for language. Then the middle two sections, they make up the limbic brain. And this section is responsible for all of our feelings, of trust, of loyalty. It's responsible for all human behavior, for all decision making. And guess what? It has no capacity for language, which means no matter the efficacy of facts and figures and data and statistics, you will not be able to inspire people unless you appeal to the middle section right there, the limbic brain. Let me share with you guys an example. Back in 1963, 250,000 people gathered at the Lincoln Memorial to listen to Dr. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, right? Now, guys, there were no invitations or evites or WhatsApp reminders or what have you. None of those were sent. And yet 250,000 people showed up on the day off. Why is that? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't go around telling people what he wanted changed in America. He told people what he believed. And he believed that there's two types of laws in this world. Those that are made by man and those that are made by higher authority. And he believed that not until the laws that are made by man are consistent with the laws that are made by higher authority can we have a just world. So those who believed what he believed, or those who were inspired by what he believed, or those who agreed with what he believed, they took his cause and they made it their own. And that is why on the day off, 250,000 people showed up, not necessarily for him, but for themselves. So to conclude this section, it is not what you do or how you do it, but your why, what you believe that enables you to connect and inspire and influence change. Number 2, be outward facing. Now, this guy right here, he's a famous film producer by the name Adam Leipzig. And he has this incredible 5-minute TED talk in which he shares his observation at his 25-year college reunion. Now, he says that out of all of the Yale graduates that he spoke to, he discovered that 80% of them were unhappy in their lives. Now, even though they were academically brilliant, they were financially well off, they were in positions of power and influence. Have you guys ever come across such people, who are very successful in all of the worldly affairs, yet they're always lamenting because they feel a sense of emptiness inside? Yeah? Well, I certainly have. Now, Adam says that the 20% of the happier people that he spoke to, they all had one thing in common. Each one of them had a clearer understanding of their life's purpose. And the way that they were able to achieve this clarity of purpose is by answering these 5 questions at every new phase in their life. So now I'm going to reveal those questions. Who are you? What do you do? Whom do you do it for? What do they want or need from you? And how have they changed as a result? Do you guys notice anything interesting about these questions? Just look at them. Anything interesting about these questions? Do you guys notice that only 2 out of the questions are about you? The other 3 are about other people? Who they are, what do they want or need from you, and how have they changed as a result? When we ponder upon these questions, our answers force us to become outward facing. And Adam says that the most successful people in any field, they're always outward facing. They always focus on whom they serve rather than how they're being served. And that is how they achieve a sense of fulfillment, which is a much more gratifying definition of success, isn't it? Guys, we often confuse moments of happiness and joy for fulfillment, right? For example, winning a lottery, or acing your exam, or getting that promotion. Now, these are all great experiences, no doubt. But fulfillment is not about these fleeting moments of happiness or joy. Fulfillment is something that you carry with you on a daily basis, whether you're having a good day or not. And the opportunity to serve others, that's what gives us a sense of fulfillment. Now, I'm sure all of you Toastmasters officers and dignitaries who are here today and mentors, I'm sure you can relate to that, right? To that sense of fulfillment by serving others. So to conclude this point, the most successful people in any field are always outward facing. They focus on whom they serve rather than how they're being served. Key number 3, dare to bear. Don't worry, nobody's taking the clothes off here. So what is that? What am I talking about? Guys, whether you're giving a speech or doing a didactic presentation at work, we have to harness the power of storytelling, isn't it? Because stories have the ability to personalize generalized experiences, right? Stories can convey our ideas, or they can engage our audience on an emotional level. And stories generate empathy. And empathy is what fosters meaningful connections. But here's the thing, guys. Empathy has nothing to do with shared experience. It's about shared emotions. Let me give you an example. While most people can't relate to my experience of post 9/11 Islamophobic attacks, right? When I highlight the emotions that I felt during that experience, for example, the feeling of hopelessness, that feeling of helplessness, of powerlessness, or that feeling of being otherized, then I am enabling my listeners to reflect back on their lives and recall incidents in their lives where they experienced similar feelings. Now, guys, before you decide which experience to share from your life, just remember this one thing. People will connect with your struggles more than your success. And that is why you must dare to bear, which is be vulnerable. Because here's the thing. If the key to communication is connection, the key to connection is authenticity. And authenticity requires vulnerability. Now, back in 2012, when I joined Toastmasters, I came straight out of intensive therapy for severe social anxiety and agoraphobia due to the 9/11 attacks. And I somehow managed to compete, and I landed up at the district level for the world and the international speech contest, right? So I was competing against 5 men. Most of them had competed before. One of them had actually won for 3 consecutive years, and this was going to be his fourth year. Now, he had all of the, hallmarks of a winning speech, both in structure and delivery. And my speech was about having severe social anxiety disorder. In fact, towards the end of my speech, I actually stretch my hand out and I say, look, guys, my hand's shaking, my jaw is rattling, my eye is twitching, and I can barely make eye contact with you guys. But the only reason I'm here today is because of something I learned in intensive therapy, which is the actions of confidence come first, the feelings come later. Now, believe it or not, there wasn't a single dry eye in the audience. In fact, that person who had won for 3 consecutive years, his wife came up to me and she said, you know what? My husband had a perfect speech, but you spoke to us. You were raw, you were real, and you were vulnerable, and that is why we connected with you. And also, when I was ready to leave, this woman comes to me and she's like, I have stage fright because of which I shy away from competing. But seeing you today, and she actually said, you were such a mess. Because I was a mess. I had severe anxiety. So she's like, you were such a mess. And I'm thinking to myself that if you can do it, I have no idea what's stopping me. So believe it or not, guys, in my district, for the very first time after that year, people with anxiety, shy people, people with stage fright, nervous people, they all started competing because the word went around that if Sarah can do it, so can we. And that is why, guys, we must dare to bear. Because the more vulnerable you are, the stronger is your connection. And the more likely you are to inspire and influence change. Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. I'm going to say that, you know what? As an inspirational speaker, I can understand, when you're vulnerable, you can inspire people. Or, you can be vulnerable behind closed doors, in front of your spouse or your best friend. But how can you be vulnerable at work, right? Before you're in front of your boss or your subordinates, right? Guys, there's many reasons as to why we may feel like it's hard to bring vulnerability into the workplace. For example, we're always taught to uphold an image of confidence and competence and authority, right? So that others may respect us. Or that, we're always under this constant pressure to perform at a higher level than others, isn't it? Or to impress our boss or our subordinates with our words or with our actions, right? Or We may fear that what if people find out about our vulnerable side? What if they find out about our soft spot and they start taking advantage of us? Or just the fact that vulnerability is perceived as a sign of weakness and incompetence by many, isn't it? So there is a lot of reasons as to why we may shy away from bringing vulnerability into the workplace. But guys, even though professionalism is crucial to workplace environment, there's also a lot of benefits into bringing vulnerability into the workplace. Now, by being vulnerable at work, don't get me wrong, okay? I don't mean you're walking around with a tissue box sharing your deepest, darkest secrets. Don't do that, yeah. For that, you have therapy. By being vulnerable at work, I mean that, you don't feel compelled to always be the first one to have an answer or to always be the first one to have an idea. So what that does is that it makes you an active listener. You are willing to embrace the perspectives, the opinions, and the thoughts of others. This one time, Nelson Mandela, during an interview, he was asked, how did he become such a phenomenal leader? Now, he said ever since he was young, he used to accompany his father to tribal meetings. His father was a tribal chief, and he would accompany him to tribal meetings. And from those meetings, he learned two things. Number one, everyone used to sit in a circle. And number two, his father was the last one to speak. So what this does is that it gives everyone the feeling that they're being heard. And you get the benefit of hearing what everyone is thinking before you share your thoughts. Now, being vulnerable, going back to being vulnerable at work, okay? Being vulnerable at work could mean that you're willing to embrace your shortcomings, and you're willing to seek help and assistance, even from your subordinates, realizing if you are the one who brought them into this company, then it's important that you can leverage on all that they can bring to the table as well. So what this does is that it makes your team members feel engaged and valued for their contribution. Now, being vulnerable could mean that you're willing to admit your faults. It could mean that you're willing to take accountability for your failures. And what this does more than anything, it humanizes you as a leader, and it creates a culture where innovation and risk-taking becomes accepted. Guys, it takes a lot of courage to admit that you don't have all of the answers, right? It takes a lot of courage to take accountability for your failures. But what this does is that it helps you evolve from a mere transactional leader to a transformational leader. And also, when you are vulnerable, you demonstrate a level of trust and respect to the person or the people that you're opening up to, right? So what this does is that it creates a foundation for open, honest, and non-judgmental communication in the workplace. So to conclude, even though vulnerability is at the heart of fear and shame and anxiety, it is also the birthplace of creativity and courage and connection. So if we want to connect with others and inspire and influence change, we must dare to bear. Number 4, release tension through humor. The fourth key to connection. Okay. So what are some of the benefits? Okay, actually, before I go on the benefits, let me tell you what I do. Okay, as an activist, an advocate, and a diversity and inclusion speaker, who speaks about sensitive topics like religion and politics and social justice issues, I personally believe that there's tons of benefits to injecting humor, whether it be in your talks or speeches or just in your conversations, right? And in my personal opinion, some of the benefits of injecting humor are it builds rapport, right? It helps communicate difficult messages. It makes information more memorable. It deflects criticism, and it relieves tension. So these are just some of the benefits of humor, and I'm sure you guys are tall tales contestants and humor speech contestants. You guys can come up with hundreds of other benefits of humor. Now, this guy right here, he is a nationally acclaimed professional stand-up comedian and a coach, and he used to be the writer for Jay Leno and Chris Rock's late night show for 9 years. And he's also been my mentor, and his name is Jerry Coley. Now, Jerry Coley says that comedy is like magic. It's all about manipulation and misdirection. Just like a magician can bend a spoon, a comedian can bend words and meanings to create jokes. Just like a magician can misdirect the audience's attention and then suddenly produce or hide a coin, a comedian can take you in one direction with a story only to fool you with a surprise ending. So today what we are going to do is we are just going to learn the basic structure of a joke so that you can take any of your talks or didactic presentations that you give at work, and you can take any line from there and you can convert it into a joke. So this is the basic structure of a joke as per Jerry Coley. The basic structure of a joke it's comprised of two things: a setup and a punchline. What is a setup? A setup is a simple logical statement or a fact. You do not make your setup funny, okay? Punchline: a follow-up to the setup that takes the audience in a completely different direction, okay? Now, the number one laughter trigger is surprise, and you cannot have surprise without misdirection. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you some jokes, okay? We only have 45 minutes, otherwise I would have gone slow and I would have had you participate too, but I need to finish this in 45 minutes. It's an hour and a half long session otherwise. So this is a setup, okay? So basically when I share with you jokes, you'll be able to tell what a setup looks like and what a punchline looks like, okay? So here's my joke. My wife said that for her birthday, she wanted me to take her out to eat somewhere expensive. So I took her to the airport. The number one rule of comedy, guys, comedy is exaggeration of the truth. It is heightened reality, but it is not absurdity. What do I mean by that? So food at the airport is expensive, isn't it? Right? So it is not a lie. It's just exaggeration of the truth. Let's try another one. Let's go back one more time to tell you what a setup and a punchline is, just so that you get it. A simple logical statement or a fact, and it is never funny. A follow-up to that statement, to the setup that takes the audience in a completely different direction. It's not about making it funny. It's about surprising your audience, saying something that they did not expect. My aunt has buried 3 husbands. That's my setup. And 2 were just napping. I have a friend who recently had twins. She named them Emily and Amelia. I don't think that's right for a couple reasons. First of all, they're boys. You see what am I doing here, guys? Now, I have a friend who recently had twins. I didn't mention whether the twins were girls or boys, right? So I can use my punchline to surprise you with that. Another thing I could do, if you look at this joke right here, she recently had twins. Doesn't mean the twins belong to her. She could have had them over and babysitting, and she's probably babysitting them, right? So when you look at your setup, you see how can I twist it so that I can surprise my audience. I was at the mall the other day and I ran into my ex-boss. totally messed up the front end of my car. You see what I did here? That's double entendre. I ran into my ex-boss can have two meanings. Her nose was so big that when she had a runny nose, they declared a flash flood warning. Is there anyone who'd like to try? Really quick. Remember, you don't have to be funny. If I take my punchline off, is there anyone who'd want to buy? Who's bold and vulnerable enough to do it? Who has the courage to be vulnerable? Anyone? I have no idea. I won't see any hands or anything because my PowerPoint is here, so I can only see Mohana's over here. Anyone, just unmute yourself and you can try.
I'll go. Sarah?
Yes, please do. Please do. I can't see you, but please do.
You see me?
No, but that's okay. I can't, but that's okay. I can hear you.
I heard Sarah is a very tall speaker till I met her.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that is true. Yes, sadly, but thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's move on. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, timing. What is timing? You know, people talk about timing. It's all about timing. And sometimes they have no idea what they're talking about. So timing is just a pause between your setup and your punchline. So what you're doing in that pause is that you're giving your audience a moment to see that image in their mind's eye before you shatter it. Okay? Let's move on to the fifth key to connection. Transform conflicts. Now, you know, guys, when I want what I want when I want it, and you want what you want when you want it, and our wants bump against each other, what do we get? Marriage. No, I'm kidding. Conflict. See, I was doing the surprise, the punchline from the last session. No, it's conflict. Now, you know, conflicts exist everywhere, right? They exist in every context, you know, be it in our social life, in our professional lives, or in our personal lives, right? Conflicts can be very destructive, right? They could lead to a lot of internal suffering. They could result in broken relationships or lost opportunities, isn't it? Now, two of the most destructive ways, guys, that we deal with conflicts are avoid and attack. So let's see, what is avoid? You know, to many of us, just the thought of being in a conflict can trigger a lot of anxiety or fear. So we may do whatever it takes to avoid. And in order to avoid, we may appease. But what happens is every time we appease, it feels like a sense of self is being chipped away. And, you know, this can lead to a lot of internal suffering. It can result in us internalizing the conflict. Now, we often see this in relationships, you know, in marriages, where one spouse is like a turtle, where anytime there's a conflict, they will just hide into their shell to avoid it. Whereas the other person may be like a skunk, where he or she may, attack and stink up the entire place. So who here is like a skunk? No, I'm just kidding. So, you know, speaking of attack, you know, oftentimes us human beings, we are like reactionary machines, isn't it? So for many of us, the only way to react in a conflict is to attack, or the only way to respond to an attack is counterattack. And that is why in conflicts, you know, oftentimes you will see people arguing and accusing and even dehumanizing one another, because we will do whatever it takes to prove the other person wrong, because to us, we are right. But guys, do you think such an approach leaves either party satisfied? No, right? Do you think such an approach, it actually changes the other person's perspective or behavior towards us? No. So even though attack and counterattack may seem very seductive, regardless of whether it's between spouses at a kitchen table or whether it's in the United Nations, the outcome is always the same. closed minds, bruised hearts, and severed relationships. Now, there is another way to deal with conflicts, and that is constructively. Now, the way to deal with conflicts constructively is by first cultivating curiosity. What do I mean by that? If I don't agree with you, or if I dislike somebody, it's very easy for me to attack their idea or their personality, isn't it? And if they attack me, it's very easy for me to respond and counterattack, right? But when we engage in this approach, the most important thing, which is our needs, they still remain unaddressed. So cultivating curiosity means hearing past attack and listening to the need, no matter how wounding that attack may be, and listening to the need of that person that he or she is not able to convey in appropriate words. Cultivating curiosity means moving towards that person with an intent to understand. Now, curiosity creates empathy, and it helps us recognize the humanity in people even when they are at their worst. Welcome vulnerability. Guys, the more insecure we are, the more distant, the more demanding, and the more defensive we become. Why is that? Because we're too afraid to be vulnerable. But it is this very fear that prevents us from connecting with one another. So being vulnerable means letting ourselves be fully seen and sharing our honest thoughts, our true feelings, and our needs that are below the surface. Next, accepting accountability. Now, instead of accusing others and excusing ourselves, we need to ask ourselves, what is our contribution in that conflict? Oftentimes what keeps us stuck in conflicts is justification. Because if I'm blameless, then you are the one who needs to change, not me, right? So accepting accountability means taking accountability for our emotions and our behaviors and our contribution to the conflict. Next is create connection. Now, I believe that it's not the words that cause the conflicts, it is the emotions behind the words. Like there's a saying, hurt people hurt people. People who are hurt, they hurt people. So we need to hear the emotions behind the harsh words. We need to listen to the hurt. And in order to do that, we need to really try to understand the other person's perspective, their personality, their temperament, their background. We need to be considerate about their fears and their doubts. Because if you're only looking at their behavior, then we are bound to become judgmental. But if we look at their fears and their doubts, then we will be more understanding. And then we need to be tactful in our speech. Because if we are offensive in our speech, they will be defensive in their reaction. Like the saying goes, you can never be cross and get your word across. So when we speak with love and kindness, people feel understood and automatically there's connection. Build boundaries. Setting boundaries for acceptable behavior during conflicts, like ground rules of how we are going to interact. For example, there will be no name calling, there will be no raising your voice. So, when we set boundaries and we respect them, that creates a foundation for trust. Then is, okay, so to conclude this section, 3 lessons I'd like to leave you with for this section. Conflict. Conflict transformation starts at the way you look at the situation. So don't just look at it from your own needs, but also the needs of the person that you're in conflict with. Let go of what you can't control, how others feel and behave, and take charge of what you can control. which is how you feel and behave in response to them. Listen to understand rather than to reply. The last key to connection is reconcile differences. There was once a disciple, and he asked a Sufi teacher, if two Sufi sayings contradict each other, which one is correct? So the Sufi teacher replied that they only contradict each other if you view them separately. For example, if you were to observe the movement of your hands while you're clapping your hands, it may seem like they're opposing each other, and you will not be able to see what is actually happening, which is the purpose of the opposition is to create the clap. So, guys, I talk about religion and politics and social justice issues, right? And oftentimes I come across difference in perspective and opinions. And during such times, I use an approach called the yes and approach, which I learned in improv comedy. So basically, I got a scholarship to one of the best improv comedy schools in the world. That was started by people of Saturday Night Live. And that's where I learned that exercise. And I use that a lot in my speaking outside of Toastmasters. And basically, the exercise goes like this. When somebody says something and states an opinion that you might not agree with, you say yes and, which means that you are still acknowledging it as their truth. You're giving them the respect by listening to them, and then you're expressing your opinion. So this not only makes the other person feel heard and his opinion valued, but it also makes him more receptive to your perspective. So the idea is that we don't have to agree with one another on everything. We don't have to accept each other's truth as our truth, but we must agree that we are all entitled to having our truth be treated with respect, right? So to conclude this section, treat every communication as an opportunity to broaden perspectives, both theirs and yours. Let go of the attitude that for me to be right, I must prove you to be wrong. Their truth is as self-evident to them as yours is to you. Don't get into arguments about who's right. With arguments, you can only win debates, but you can never win hearts. So to conclude, when you're shooting an arrow in a random direction, the chances of you hitting your target are minimal, right? So these 6 keys to connection will ensure that you aim your arrow in the right direction to hit your target or to establish your connection. And once you can connect through your words, actions, and your behavior, you will automatically be able to impact, inspire, and influence change. So those were my 6 keys to connection. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm glad I'm within time.
Thank you. Thanks a lot,